Hey, and welcome on back to Workshop Wednesday. I'm Chelsea Meyer. Thanks for joining me today in my workshop. And I am super excited for this episode because we are going to do a pattern hack today. Now, I love pattern hacking because with each and every pattern, there are so many ways you can just tweak it, adjust it, and change it into a totally new garment. And especially if you have a garment that you know fits you well, that you like to wear, adjusting the style details can give you that edge to create a whole wardrobe of pieces that you know fit, that you love to wear, and that are unique and have their own little style and flair. So we're going to be making a button placket today. I actually saw a lady walking in front of me going into church the other day, and she had a t-shirt on, a regular t-shirt with a button placket, like a faux placket, and little shirt buttons down the back. And I thought, that's so cute. I want to do that as well with a shirt pattern that I made. But I thought today I was going to take the Kelsey top and add a real button placket to it in a woven fabric. Now, the Kelsey top is a sew along tutorial class that I teach, and I do love it so very much because it teaches you how to take your body measurements and cross-reference them with your pattern. We actually draft the pattern, so you get to dip your toe in the drafting pool and learn how fun it is to create patterns. And that also gives you the confidence to start adjusting your patterns and really make them what you want them to be when you're sewing. So it's a great all-around class, and if you're interested in that, I'll put the link down in the description box so you can go and get yourself a recorded copy that you have lifetime access to, and you can sew along with it, draft your own pattern. You can make this top that I'm wearing. This is the Kelsey top. I have it here in just like a regular kind of light t-shirt knit. I love it because it's so comfortable to wear. It has just cut on sleeves. But if you want to use what you learn in this video on any top, it really works. It's really easy to apply all the steps that we go through today to create a button placket and add that detail adjustment to whatever top you'd like. So let's get to it. So to do this adjustment, I'm going to start out with just the back panel, since we're adding this button placket to the back of the shirt and down the center back line. We're really not adjusting any other pieces than this back panel. What we want to do, make sure though, is that once we've added the button placket, our panel is going to be exactly the same size. So we don't want the back to grow in length across or to get shorter. Otherwise, it's not going to line up with the front. So you can see here, this line, this is our center back line, and then we have our seam allowance that we've added. You can also read here, it is the Kelsey top, this is the back panel, and how many times we need to cut it out. So before we go any further though, we need to decide how wide our button placket is going to be when it's finished. I have my buttons here already. I'm going to do these really big buttons. I'm going to make this a little bit of a vintage kind of style, since I've got this a butler check type fabric. It's going to be really cute with, here you can kind of see the blue check line in it. It'll be really cute with these big bold buttons, and this is a decorative detail that I'm adding anyways. I was going to do it a faux placket, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do just a full-on real button placket. So the importance of knowing your button size before you start is this will help you know how wide your placket needs to be. You always want your button placket to be a little bit wider than the buttons themselves. So with this size button, I'm going to go with 4 centimeters. The other thing I'm going to change, and this wasn't the plan, but this is a little extra bonus adjustment, is when I was looking at these buttons on here, instead of spacing them evenly, I thought, you know what, it would be really cute to do them a little higher up and then leave a little bit of a slit at the bottom. And then my thought was, why don't I do an extra wide seam too, so that it's a really chunky hem on the bottom, which means I'm going to need a little more seam allowance than this here to do that seam. So we're going to add a little bit of length to the bottom, put in new markings for where the fold or where the seam needs to fold, so that we know the width here, and then add our placket as well. So now that we know the width of our button placket, I've just moved over this pattern and I'm going to take the buttons off. I've taped this piece in place so that it's not going to move around on me when we do the adjustments. And we're going to add the extra width that we need for a cut-on button placket first. Now for this placket, I'm going to do a cut-on placket for the bottom and then a separate one on top. So I want the look of the separate placket on the top for the outside, just so that it's top stitched, has a little bit more kind of reinforcement of the transition. It will pop a little bit more that way, and it will give you the opportunity of seeing what the difference is. You can definitely do both pieces of the placket cut on or both pieces separate. I'm just going to do it cut on so that it makes it easier for me for the bottom portion, and then the separate because I want the look of it on the top. And we're going to start off just by removing the extra from this pattern. So what I mean by that is when we're finished with our placket, we want this center back line to still be the center back, and the placket should be centered directly over top of that line. So half of our placket will be on the right side and half on the left side. Our total width is 4 centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a line here right at the 2 centimeter line. So 2 centimeters on the inside from that center back. It's going to extend it down since we're going to add some length as well. So this is now the line where our button placket will end. On this side, we need to extend it 2 centimeters from the center back as well. I'm going to just draw that line in. So now we have the 4 centimeter button placket marked in our pattern. Because I want to fold the fabric over the width of the button placket and then fold it under again so that my raw seam allowance is totally covered by the placket, and that those 2 layers of fabric will help stabilize the placket. In this fabric, I shouldn't need any extra interfacing, but I do want to have the double layers. I'm just going to go ahead and put in another mark, a full 4 centimeters farther out. Perfect. I'm going to extend the neckline. So I'm just going to cross check here. So where my center back is, the neckline is still level right at that 2 centimeters on the inside. Right after that 2 centimeters, you can see it starts to curve up. So if your neckline curves much quicker, you can wait and do this after you've cut it out. In fact, why don't I just show you that as well? I'm going to draw in my line so you can kind of see it visually come together, but I'm going to also show you the trick how you can match it up easily with a sharper curve in your neckline. So there's the top of our placket, and then here at the bottom we need to decide how much extra we're adding. So I think I'm going to do about a 7 centimeter hem. So if this is going to be my bottom edge, I'm just going to drop it down 7 centimeters and draw in my new fold line. I can see here 7 centimeters up is still pretty square, and then it starts to flare out, so I don't need to bring that hem out. If I was already getting into the flare, I would want to reshape this edge so that it flares back out, so I wouldn't run into a length discrepancy when I fold it up. But I can just square it off, and then I'm also going to add a bit of seam allowance here. So I'm going to fold over the edge just like 5/8 of an inch, 1 centimeter, and then fold the hem up. So this is the total distance I need to add. I need to add to my hem. So there I have my wider hem. I'm also going to just put a quick little notch in here so that I know where the hem should fold up to. and then just my little fold. So when I have these 3 notches, I know that I'll fold over that little bit, then fold it up, and that it should line up with this notch. And I'm just gonna throw notches at the top as well. So at the top and the bottom, we'll have notches right where I need to fold that button placket. So we'll notch it there and notch it here, so that it will be easy for me to fold over my placket and press it. So we've already accomplished all of the adjustments that we need here. I'm going to go ahead and cut it out and then show you the trick for matching up the neckline here. Okay, so now that I have the extra cut off, I'm just gonna fold this up right along my fold lines for my placket. So we'll fold it over our full 4 centimeters, so the full width of your placket, and then fold it over again. You can already start to see how and why that fabric will just stabilize this placket, since it's the full width of it on the inside. There we go. Okay, and after you have that button placket folded up, if you had a neckline that was went around a lot sharper and started to curve right away, you could then just follow your pattern as you cut it. So this is just an example here, and then we'll true it up to our pattern in a second. So you can see it starts to curve right away, and when I unfold it, you can see why that's important. Look at the shape we've got going on right here at the top. We need that little extra bit so that our placket isn't too short. So now I'm going to fold it up again and true it up. There we go. Then I'm going to get my handy dandy little notcher and pop these notches in where I need them. Okay, so just to make it easier on me when I'm cutting it out, I'm going to cut out both pieces in this both the right and the left half. Then, however, because I want to do a separate placket on the second side, I'm going to cut off the extra that I have. So because this is the line where our button placket ends when we fold it up, that's going to be the stitch line for the portion with the sewn on placket. So what I need to do here is I'm just going to use a different color and draw in a line that tells me where my seam allowance ends. So I'm just going to do my regular 5/8 seam allowance right about a centimeter. So this is actually the line where the left half of my top in the back will end. And then I have just enough seam allowance, and when I stitch on that placket, it will be right along the stitch line, right at the edge of where this underneath placket ends. So now that I have that in there, I'm just going to set this panel aside and quickly make the pattern piece for the placket itself. I'm going to start by measuring the length that I need. So 21 inches exactly. So 53 centimeters long. I'm just going to start with this guy here. And then I know I want the finish width to be 4 centimeters, so I need to make it 8 centimeters wide plus my seam allowance. Have a nice right angle here, so I'm just gonna follow that. And then flip my pattern square around. And if I do 53 this corner, 8 at this corner, I know I have a nice square piece. Just bring it down to 4 centimeters. I'm just going to draw in a fold line just as a place marker. So this is where my button placket is going to fold. And the last thing I need is my seam allowance and notches. So I'm just going to do my standard seam allowance all the way around. I did, when I did my measurement here, I already had this seam allowance included, so I don't need any seam allowance on the bottom or top of my placket. I'm just going to extend that line. I may put a little bit of interfacing in this placket just because I want it to have a little bit more body to it. We'll see after I cut it out, depending on how the fabric feels, if I think it's going to need a little bit of extra help and support with an interfacing, or if it will be good as is. The bottom placket will definitely be good the way it is. And then I'm just going to finish this piece up by simply putting a notch right where the fold line is. It's always handy when you go to, you know, press things, fold things over, if you've got extra notches. Marking the center is something I like to always have marked. There we go. We've now created both our separate placket and our cut-on placket. And we also know where we need to trim this original pattern down to. I'm just going to fold it over right on that line so we can visualize that as well. This is where we need to shorten the back of the pattern so that when we put on this separate placket, the back of our garment isn't growing in width. So that will just be attached like that, and we'll have that separate edge. Now that we have all of the pieces cut out and ready, I just laid them out on the fabric to get cut out. I did add an extra piece to the hem on the front since we went ahead and did that extra adjustment to this style. So I just added this piece to the bottom the same way, 7 centimeters plus my seam allowance. Since this fabric has the squares on it, I just lined up my line so that I know when I cut this out, the pieces are going to be square with each other and square to the squares. And I do need to run all the pieces lengthwise, but I can invert this fabric. This fabric is just a plain weave, so it's the same weave pattern regardless of which way around the piece is cut out, and the fabric doesn't change in any color, sheen, or anything like that. But I did line up the bottom of my hem with the same spot on the fabric so that the blue square lines up. So that means my side seam will line up, and also my button placket, I've just placed it right here so it bumps straight up against the center back. This bumps up with the lines exactly matching up so that everything is nice and square. And since this is a straight edge on a straight edge, I'm just going to bump those up together. And I have everything that I need. So I'm going to get this cut out, and then I'll get the Kelsey top started. Once again, if you want the tutorial to make this exact pattern, I'll have the link down in the description box where you can get yourself a copy of that recorded class. And otherwise, you can do this adjustment with a different pattern. I'm just going to bring us up to speed with this one to the place where we are actually working on the placket, since this video is about the addition of the button placket. If you're doing a different pattern, there might be different steps for piecing your garment together if you have a set-in sleeve, things like that. So I'm going to just steer clear of all of the tips for making the Kelsey top. We're just going to focus on the button placket here. So here we go. We have all of our pieces, front, back, button placket. And I'm just going to go ahead and separate these two back panels. This fabric doesn't have a right and a left either. So I'm just going to take this piece to be the left-hand side. And then just trim it down to the size that I need here. If I'd wanted to, I could have cut them out separately, but it's just quicker to cut them out together. And so I just cut out the bigger size, and I can fold along my seam allowance line. And this will just help center that piece again so that our center back doesn't grow, but remains exactly the size we need for our front panel. So after cutting out this fabric and just seeing how it lays, I think it will be very nice for a top, but I do think I need just a teeny bit of interfacing for this placket. So I'm going to just cut this out in a lightweight interfacing just to give it a little bit more stability as well. So here we have our top prepped and ready for the placket. You can see here that one side is much longer than the other side with the cut on placket. And I've also prepped this placket here with just a little bit of fusible interfacing just to give it a little bit of stability. I also found a blue exactly in the blue of the stripe here for the top stitching. So I have that color in my machine. I really love how the sleeve itself hemmed with that blue stitching. So I'll have that on the machine as well for the top stitching on my button placket. Now you might have been wondering why I didn't put the markings in the placket here for the buttons. If you buy a commercial pattern, it will always have your markings for your buttonholes and the buttons on it already. I didn't put it in the pattern because I want to kind of play around with the placement of my buttons on the top itself. So once I have the button placket in place, I can kind of mark out where I like the buttons to be placed visually and then mark my buttonholes from there. And I always like to mark the exact location of my buttons after I have the buttonholes in the garment and opened up, and then based on where they're located, I'll mark where my button should be. So that's why we haven't got to that step yet. You might also notice here that I have the hem pressed up because I did decide to do this heavier hem. We're gonna finish off the bottom edge of the button placket a little bit differently because I don't want it to get too thick with all the layers and the interfacing we have going on in the placket. We're going to trim it out a little bit, the extra hem width, but in the garment itself we have this wide hem. So that's pressed up, and without further ado, let's start by adding our button placket to this edge. So I'm just going to line up the corners at the very top and stitch it down to the bottom. However, here at the bottom, as I mentioned, I do have my seam allowance already folded up. So my button placket's going to be a little bit long. That's totally fine. We're going to just trim it down to size, but we want to attach the hem along the seam. Okay, so I've attached the button placket. We're just here at the ironing board, and I'm going to fold it over so that the seam allowance is going inside the placket, and just press this seam here. I love these squares here. It's so much fun to line up the edges. Then we're going to flip it around and just chat quick about how we're going to finish this on the inside. So as you can see here, we've got this extra fabric, and I didn't actually stitch the hem yet because I want to top stitch it all the way through the button placket as well. but having all of this extra fabric in here is going to get really, really thick. So we're going to finish it a little bit differently. I'm going to first fold up my edge here, just slightly shy of the seam allowance I used to attach it, because we're going to top stitch from the outside to close this up. And to finish this side of the placket, we're going to have it folded over, and as I mentioned, we'll top stitch from the outside to close it. But before we do, I want to finish off both the top and the bottom end. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip it back on itself, right side together, with that seam allowance already folded over. And then I'm just going to stitch right across the end. So I'm going to do so on both ends. Here at the top, because we go straight from this finished edge of the button placket into doing just a tiny narrow rolled hem for the rest of the neckline, I'm just going to use the seam allowance width for that neckline at the top here. But at the bottom, I'm going to finish it off nice and square. So I'm actually going to bring over my ruler and my chalk just to make sure that it does end up being square. So because we're actually going to flip this inside out, or right side out rather, when we finish it, I don't want to press it, but I do want to make sure that both lengths of the zipper placket here are the same length. So I'm just running my hand along it, and then I'm going to place my ruler right here. Make sure it's square with the edge of the hem, and also square with the edge of the button placket as well. So this is why I love these grade rulers for things like this, to make sure we have square corners. And I'm gonna pop down just below the actual seam allowance itself. Because this is so thick, I want to give myself just a tiny bit of length, so that when I turn it around, there's enough volume in the material to roll over the edge. Otherwise, if I did it right in line with the hem, it would probably be a little bit too short with the bulk of the seam allowance on the inside, and then it would just kind of pull the button placket up, and it wouldn't actually be a square edge. So that's why I'm going to just give myself like really just like 2 millimeters, not more than 1/8 of an inch, probably more like a 1/16 of an inch. So just slightly longer. I'm just going to draw a line here. So this is going to be my stitch line for finishing this edge, just reaching for a pin. And I'm going to pin these two layers together so that they don't slide around. And then I'm going to finish both of these ends off at the machine right away. But before I go to do that, I'm going to flip it around, and let's look at the button placket on this side. And so first of all, we're going to fold it over and press it. So I have my notches, and I know it needs to be 4 centimeters and then 4 centimeters. I love these little hand rulers for doing things like this, measuring hems, plackets, edges at the ironing board, just to make sure my seam allowance is going to be consistent. So we'll press that. This fabric is so dark, I'm sure it's kind of hard to see the edge of the fabric in the camera. I didn't think about that when I picked this fabric for this project. It's always nice to do kind of medium colors. Not too bright, not too dark. Those pick up best. But I am really excited for this fabric for this top. It's going to look a little kind of vintage. I'm going to fold this in. That extra 4 centimeters to complete the placket. Get some nice steam going to sharpen these edges. Okay, To finish the top and bottom of the button placket on this side, we're going to do a similar flipping it around. So I'm going to leave this first edge still folded over, but I'm going to flip it around right to that fold, that last fold. And I'm going to stitch across here once again exactly the width that I'm going to use to finish off the narrow rolled hem around the neckline. And here at the bottom, now that I have it pressed, I can feel it's really actually isn't too thick without those extra layers. So I'm going to leave this side the way it is. It is laying really nicely. We could stitch it similar to what we're doing up here, but it's a little bit trickier because we've got to get into the bottom of the hem as well as the button placket. So I'm just going to leave all of these layers nicely stacked on top of each other. What I really just want to make sure is that my seam allowance from the button placket isn't hanging down, but as long as that's nice and flush, this corner is actually going to be underneath our top placket as well when the garment's on, so no one's ever going to see this corner. I'm going to stitch this button placket down, so I'll have some nice blue top stitching on the outside, and also after I've finished the other side of the placket, I'll do the hem all the way around because I want to stitch from edge to edge with the hem stitching without any overlap of my stitch line. So that being said, I'm just going to throw a pin here just to keep things in place, and let's finish off these ends. We finish these ends, I'm just going to flip them around and pull out the corner here. Make sure it's nice sharp corner, and flip around the bottom. Before I flip this side, little thread, I'm going to just snip off this extra seam allowance so we don't have any extra bulk in our placket at the bottom here. So we'll flip this one around. Now you can see here this nice transition, the line from the hem right into the button placket. If I hadn't given it just that little bit of extra room, it would have been a little bit tight and would have had more of a little dimple or pull here at the corner instead of being a really nice smooth transition. So now that we have those flipped, what we're going to do is just take this back to the ironing board quick. Now that both of our ends are finished, I can press this button placket, the side here with the interfacing, the set on one. I can press it in half. I'm just making sure always that I'm just barely covering the stitching of where it's attached to the garment. That way I know when I do my top stitching on the outside, I'm going to catch this edge and close it up nice and secure. So that's this side. Just press the corner a little more. Let's get the other side pressed down. So I'll flip this corner as well. Other than this top edge, we already have this side pressed entirely. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the neckline and the hem, the top stitching on both plackets, and then we'll be ready for marking our button placement. completely stitched, hemmed, the button placket, top stitched. We have the underneath portion with the cut on placket, and then the set on one on top here. So the last step would be to add in the buttonholes and then the buttons. I do have another tutorial video here on YouTube. I'll put the link down in the comment box on all my tips and tricks for doing that. I'm going to throw my buttons on here first before I get busy with my buttonholes here to just play around with the placement. I do like this extra heavy hem and leaving that a little bit open, a little bit loose with the little sled and the more jacket type fabric. This is kind of like a suiting material, a light cool wool suiting material. So this is what I'm thinking for my button placement. So I'm gonna just measure my buttons, get my buttonholes marked on and put in. And as I mentioned, if you want to know how to do this, then pop down to the description box and check out that video for adding buttons to a garment. Ta-da! Here we are. Ooh, I love this. This has like kind of a dressy, professional vibe to it. There's our button placket. Look at that. I do love this little slit here too on the bottom, how it just like opens up and has that little V to it, and these great big buttons. They make it so retro, so vintage flair. Yeah, so there you go, the Kelsey top in a woven fabric. Once again, I just love this pattern because it's so versatile. You really can make it in woven knit. I've even made it in a lace twice, 2 different types of lace, and I love it just to throw on over a tank top. You can wear it with pants or skirts. It's just really super versatile. Once again, if you want to get yourself a copy of the Kelsey top class so that you can create exactly this look, then the link is down below. So take a look down there. If there's a special price, there'll be a promo code posted on the page, so you'll be able to type that in with your purchase and just get yourself a copy of that class and sew along with me. And otherwise, I do hope that you enjoyed this tutorial for how to create your own button placket, and definitely hop on over to my Facebook group. If you're not already a member, I'd love to see you there, answer questions, see what you're sewing. And there will also be a link below where you can sign up for my email list if you want to get the inside scoop on all of the live classes that I'm teaching and the other specials that I offer. So sign up for that. The link is below as well. And until next week, take care and happy sewing.